bless you. Now we're ready, yep. We had to wait there. Cool. Streaming, fantastic. So, today we're talking about variable declaration in JavaScript. How many ways are there to declare a variable, or how many keywords can we use to declare a variable in JavaScript? Very nice. That was like a singing group. One said let, one said var, and one said const. Do, re, mi, fa, lo, sa, ti. Yeah. Very nice. Yes, varlet and const. You're quite right. You're quite right. There are some differences between the three ways. We're going to talk about some of those differences today. Yeah, the one I want to start with is perhaps a little bit tricky to get your head around. We'll see how it goes. I will try and illustrate it. So, if I declare something with var, which by the way, let and const were designed to replace var, essentially, because as we're trying to illustrate here, there were some problems with declaring variables with var, and it led to some really hard to debug code in certain instances. So let's try and illustrate that now, perhaps. Okay, so let's just say, call this variable var declaration. And what I want to talk about first is the scope of each of these declarations. So, do you know what I mean by the term scope?
If it's just viewable within the function or outside as well.
Yeah, so it's sort of like, is it available inside the function? Is it available outside? So it basically just means at any one time, what variables are available to our code or to our function, yeah, to the specific environment execution context that we are in. So, yep. So I'm going to do a var declaration here, and I don't know. Let's say singing group, yeah, because you're all beautifully in harmony this morning. Yeah, and then let's finish off the others. Declaration. Just so that I can easily find these variables, and I'll explain why hopefully in a second, I'm going to append each of them with an A, just so they're at the start of the alphabet. I've just had some random strings in there. Singing group, maybe form a choir, and then you'll be concert ready. Away you go. So, I want to talk about the differences in scope between var, let, and const. The first thing I want to talk about is essentially we can group scope into three categories. We can talk about global scope. What do I mean by global scope? Everywhere, yeah, we're doing a big hand movement. It's everywhere, yeah. Everywhere in our application, we will be able to access that variable. We also have function scope. That's what it sounds like. It's only available to that particular function. And then we have block scope as well. What's the difference between a function and a block? So if I had a function, oops, and you know I define something in my function, that's going to be function scope at the moment. A is available inside of the whole function. obviously really boring variables, these ones, but we've got an if condition, yeah? We could have done a for loop, an if, something like that. And then we put these curly braces. So anywhere inside of those curly braces, that we can call that a block. That is a block of code, yeah? Of course, this is a block as well, the whole function block, but that would be when we're talking about scope, function scope, whereas just inside this block, we might have some things that are only block scope, yeah? Okay, so I'll leave that there for later actually, and we'll pad that out, but let me just comment it out for now. So my question to you is, do you know what sort of scope var, let, and const are by default? If you don't, then we're just going to run the code and see what happens. So I'm going to run this now. And of course, we're not going to return anything. I haven't told it to console log anything. What is the name of the global object in the browser? The global JavaScript object in a browser? Does anyone know? No? You heard of the window object? Yeah? So if I console.log window, then window should at least be defined already, because when the browser boots up, JavaScript will create that for us. The browser will create that for us. And I've spelled console wrong. Is that what you were going to say, Richard? Thank you. Okay, so we see window come up. And if we drop that down, we can see that, you know, the browser has a lot of stuff in it that we could use. And you might notice this thing has come up here. Yeah? And that's why I put the A on it, so I didn't have to scroll all the way down to a V, so I could actually see it. Yeah? We've got a variable declaration here using var that has been appended to the window object. So it's been appended to the global object. Yeah? Where is my let and my const? I can't see them, right? A let should be around somewhere. I've got alert. Nope, doesn't seem to be there. And a const is also not there. So one of the problems with var was that if we kept declaring lots of variables with var, it could pollute what we say pollute the global scope. So in other words, we're creating all of these variables and they're getting appended to the global object. Therefore, each one of them is taking up a tiny bit of memory. Now, memory's cheap in JavaScript, but if you get a huge application, then all of these variables are getting created and they never get garbage collected because they're assigned to the global object. They're available globally, so the program thinks, oh, you need these variables, I'm going to keep them there. Let and const don't do that, so they don't pollute the global scope. Yeah, so that was one of the reasons that var is now not used much, so we don't accidentally pollute the global scope. If we wrapped, I might probably have to completely shut down DevTools because we've stored it globally, but if I wrap this all in a function, declaration scope, as I said, this is probably the hardest one to understand, but I wanted to try and attempt it first. So if you're following me so far, well done. Right, and just because we've stored those variables globally, I'm going to shut down my tab so that we clear the memory. I might even shut this one down as well, just to be doubly sure. So now we're declaring all of our 3 variables inside a function. Yeah, so we've created a function block. So the function itself should be declared globally. So let's append that with an A as well. But is the var declaration going to get put onto the window object or not? Yeah, we're thinking no, right? It's inside of a function. The function is containing that variable. Let's see what happens. Oops. So console.log window, and yeah, have I? So it's just spitting my function back at me. Just get rid of that for a second. Still just getting that. True. That would help. So we just want the function to be stored, we're not actually concerned about displaying or returning anything now. Okay, cool. So now of course we return the window object. Yeah, sorry about that, thank you. And we can see that our function called declaration scope, a declaration scope, was appended to the global object, but this time our var declaration wasn't. Yeah. So therefore, by default, it means that vars aren't global scope. They're not automatically getting appended to the global object. They are contained within functions. Does anyone know how to create a tree-like structure of objects? How to display a tree-like structure of objects using the console? So this is, so this is logging. So instead, if you use console.dir, then sometimes it's a bit clearer to see what you need. So this creates a directory-like view of things. So if we have a look, okay, I'm not even going to go into that because I think it could get a little bit confusing. But what I want to do now as well is just to clarify what the global object is in Node. Does anyone know what the global object is in Node, or how you would even run a Node environment from a terminal? So I think it's a useful thing to be able to test your JavaScript code in a Node environment as well as the browser. How do I run a Node environment from a terminal? A Node REPL, a read, evaluate, print loop. Yeah, I can just type Node. If I do that, this is essentially a little shell now that I can type commands into. And if I did the same, console.log window, will that give us anything? Window is not defined. So now we're not in a browser environment, we're in a Node environment. Yeah, browser creates the window object. Node's global is actually called global. It has some different things attached, but if we ran that same bit of code, we would see that things get declared and appended to the global object using var, yeah, if we used it outside of a function. Anyway, that's a bit of an aside, but I just wanted to make you aware that you can create a Node REPL just by typing Node, and you can run JavaScript code inside of there as well. So you could test any of your solutions to the Kadiri training inside of that Node environment as well if you wished.
Sorry, in what
Yep.
situation would you use window? What situation?
What situation would you use window? Yeah, you don't really want to put anything onto the global object. Yeah, so that's why we don't use var anymore. We don't want to pollute the global object. That's just setting up all the things that we can use in the JavaScript language. So for example, we can use arrays in JavaScript, right? So if I did window.array, oops, and run the code, then we can see that we have an array object here, and it has certain methods on it. The isArray method, and if we looked inside of the prototype, you'll see all of those array methods that we're getting familiar with. Concat, every, filter, find, flat is a new one, includes, yeah, map. So we've covered quite a lot of these already. So that's just setting up our JavaScript environment so that we have access to all of these built-in methods inside of the language. Yeah. But we don't want to pollute that. We don't want to add anything to the built-in methods because that can get very confusing.
Sorry, I don't understand how, like, you're saying that a variable var will get assigned to a global object and take memory space. But then, depending on where we put it, we can actually determine what its scope is going to be. So,
That's why let and const replace var, is that right?
Yeah, so let and const.
Var inside the function, then the scope becomes local, doesn't it?
The scope becomes function scope, yeah. So as long as you have all of your variable declarations inside of a function, then it's okay.
Oh, so you mean that when let and const are outside of the function,
Yeah, we saw that, right?
they won't get...
They don't pollute the global scope, yeah? So when I had my let declared outside of the function,
Okay, no, I get
then they
it.
don't pollute the global.
No, I get it.
Whoops, if I did window like that, then there's no a let declaration anywhere, yeah? That hasn't polluted the global.
So, how do you declare variables that you want, or what's the ideal way of declaring variables that you want multiple functions to have access to?
What's the ideal way of declaring variables that you want multiple functions or multiple files to have access to? Is that your question?
Multiple functions.
Multiple functions to have access to. Yeah, so you could do that, right? If you did it with let and const, then all of the functions will have access to it, but you haven't polluted the global scope. So if we do something like that, then of course we still have access to the access me variable, but we haven't polluted the global scope, yeah? So we always look up the chain. First, JavaScript says, is access me inside of this function? Nope. Is it outside of the function somewhere? Yes. Okay, return that value. So if I run this, we should get hello printed back. Because I haven't invoked the function. So if I do that, then I get hello printed back in my console. Yeah. So that's fine. Just define it with let and const outside of a function, and any function has access to that variable as well. Yeah, that's how the scope chain works in JavaScript. Cool. Anyway, let's try and get back onto var, let, and const. Let's try and go back to the very original that I had. Yeah. Let's take it out of the function for now. Right then. Does const let me change the value of well, this value basically. Yeah. If I declare something with const, can I then change that value later on in my code?
No. Unless it's an object, then you can change the objects internally.
Yeah, it depends is the cop-out answer, right? You can in certain cases. So what const doesn't allow is reassignment. How do I assign things in JavaScript? Or reassign things? If I've already declared or assigned a variable to a value, how do I then redeclare?
Using the name.
Yep, so let's say I wanted to redeclare my variable declaration, yeah? Then I can just type, if I put it in camel case, I can just type variable declaration equals new group, right? And then if I, what gets spat back? Yeah, okay. And then new group gets spat back as the last line of code, right? So just to clarify, if I just console logged it instead, is my variable declaration going to be singing group or new group? New group, right? Because we've re-declared it. Does let allow me to redeclare things? Yep, that's fine as well. Oh, let d equal, oh, that's why, because I've got variable declaration, so let d in there. Yep, so that allowed me. How about const? No? Oh, I didn't mean that, did I? Const d equals new group. Uncaught type error. Yeah, so if you have declared a variable with const, you cannot later reassign it anywhere in your code. Yeah? But you can with let and var. So that's another difference. Richard mentioned something quite interesting. He said if it's an object or a complex data type, then we can actually change the value. We can't do that through reassignment. We still can't, for example, if this was just an array, which is a complex data type in JavaScript, we still can't use that equals sign to reassign things. By the way, these are like common interview questions, which is why we're going through it. Yeah, things like this, Varlet and Const, declaring variables. What does const do? Yep, so we still get the same error, right? Assignment to a constant variable. But how about if we used one of the methods in JavaScript that can actually mutate an array? Yeah, so we can use a method to actually change the array object. Can you think of a mutator method?
I think we could just use the square brackets and then try and do that as well.
Yeah, we could also do that. So const d has just one item in it at an index of 0. So you could say for the element or for the value at index 0 in our const d array, then you can just reassign that to a new value, for example. Then if we console log const d, which is obviously our variable which was declared using const, what are we going to get? Are we going to get an array of concert ready? Are we going to get new value as a string? Are we going to get an array with new value in it? What are we going to get? Or are we going to get this again? Type error, assignment to constant variable.
So what are we doing? Are we replacing or we're changing?
Well, what does this usually do? If you have an array
Yeah.
and you index something and you put it equal to a certain value, what does that usually do?
Plus the value in the zero index in your
Yeah, it usually replaces the zero index value of the array with the new value.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my question is, will that still work in this case, or will we still get an error?
I would think no.
You would think no. No what? No, we'd get an error? No, it wouldn't work?
I would think no would probably it wouldn't work because we're falling off from what we've talked about constant. But you know,
Uh-huh, okay.
no, it's
So
not.
Abdul thinks an error. Anyone else? You think it will have new value, or in an array, or as a string?
I think it's going to be an array of the new value.
Okay. So anyone else think anything different? Or does everyone else think new array, well not new array, but array with new value, right? Yeah, okay, I'll run it. Yeah, correct. Right, so using an accessor, shorthand if you like, to access part of the array, we can actually put a new value inside. We haven't changed where the variable is pointing to. It's still pointing to an array that is stored in memory. We've only changed the contents of that. We could have also done something like using mutator methods such as push. And pushed a new value to the array. What will get returned now?
Concert ready and then new value.
Concert ready is the first element in the array, comma, new value is the second element in the array, correct? Yep, perfect. So we can't use that equal operator, but we can still change complex objects in JavaScript, even if they have been defined with const.
So is it logical to look at it and think once you can avoid the equal operator, then you should be able to do it?
No, if you want to change something in your code, use let, because that then says to any other developer reading your code, this is a value that we expect to change in the future. So declare it with let, and then you can use mutator methods or whatever you want on it. Yeah. If you want something to stay constant, declare it as a const. Yeah. And if you declared a non-complex value, what we call primitives, such as strings, then do we have any way to change a string in JavaScript?
I think if you declare the string as an object, so you
Hold on, declare the string as an object? No, because then you're using an object, right? So, now if we declare a primitive type initially, a string, what are other primitive types? Do anyone?
number
Numbers.
Yeah, numbers, booleans,
undefined,
undefined,
None.
null, yeah. And there's one more. Nan is not actually. If you did symbol is the other one, correct? Yeah. If you did type of null in JavaScript, it returns object. That's one of those what moments, yeah, with the what man.
None. N-A-N.
Oh, nan, you said. Sorry. That's what I meant to type. Yeah. Nan. Type of nan is a number. Yeah. Weird, right? Not a number is a number. Yeah. But anyway, I mean, usually you're going to use things like booleans, strings, and numbers. Yeah, they're the ones that you might want to change in your code. You're not going to change undefined and not a number. Where were we? Okay, yeah. So in other words, we have no way of changing primitive values, so they can safely be declared with const. Yeah, and they should never change. All right. How are we doing for time? Yeah, it's already getting on a bit, isn't it? Yeah, I will send you a snippet with a function and a block inside of it, and I'll get you to play around with that code so you can hopefully see the scoping differences between let and const versus var when used inside functions and inside blocks. The other thing I wanted to talk about is a related topic, which previously we've done in separate workshops, but for this one I just wanted to mention it because I feel that they're linked. And we've begun talking about it. We've begun talking about primitive values versus complex values, right? So this diagram essentially explains how primitives are stored and copied. So when we have a primitive, then let's say we created variable a first, then that gets stored in memory with a value assigned to the variable a. Yeah? The name a points to this value in memory. If we do b equals a, then b creates a copy of the primitive value. So we've now got two variables that share the same value, yeah, with primitives. So as code, that would look like, let's do a new one, right? So as code, what shall I declare it with? Var or const?
Let.
Or let. Let's do let, yeah? Not var was the answer I was looking for, basically. Now we don't want an object, so let a equals, let's just say 1, right? Keep it easy. A primitive value, a number. Let b equals 2. Nope, let b equals a, right? Let b equals a. So then, if I change a in any way, does that also change b? You say yes, Nilofa? So if I did, how did you want to change a? Do you want to do a equals 5 or something like that? Is that the way you wanted to change it? Is that okay? Is that acceptable? Do you think both a and b will now be 5, or do you think something different? What's your answer? Are a and b both 5? Not sure? Okay. Well, when you said that if I change one, the other one should change, what did you have in mind? Did you want to do something like that, or you wanted to do a++? Or what did you want to do? No?
Depends where they're pointing to in memory.
Depends where they're pointing to in memory. I agree with that, but we've sort of clarified from this diagram. This is a memory address. So in other words, when we create variable A, it gets stored at this memory address. When we make a copy of B using B equals A, that gets stored at a separate memory address with primitives, with primitive values. So therefore, if we change one of them, we don't change the other one. Yeah, we've changed 5, B remains unchanged, but it's not really that fair of an example because we're using the equals sign anyway to reassign things. But let's make it a bit more complicated. Let's use a complex data type, an array. If I now change A, will that be any different? Oh. Did I not even do that before? Oh, up here, of course, yeah. Let B equals A. Yep. And then, yeah, we'll change A. So if I use the equal symbol still, will A be 1 or 2? 2. Will B be 1 or 2? Or an array with 1 or 2?
B will show 2.
Okay. Richard says B will show 2. Do we agree? Do we disagree?
Still thinking 1.
Porrick's still thinking 1. Anyone else going to volunteer?
Is it a copy that is made or
Yeah.
or they're pointing at the
We'll go through it after we see the result. I'll tell you why, but yeah. Yeah, Richard, if you want to explain why, then. So Richard thinks it will be B is equal to an array with 2 inside.
Yeah, B will change because they're pointing to the same.
Yeah, because with the arrays, when we set A equals something and we do B equals A, we are saying B equals the pointer or the reference of A, and it's not a primitive value anymore. Arrays are objects, so we pass that reference. So when we mutate A, B is like an alias of A, and it just shows the mutation of A.
Did people understand that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so with complex data types such as arrays and objects, when we do B equals A, we're just passing by reference. So the value is stored at the same address, and B just points to the same memory address as A does. Yeah, it's pretty theory heavy, this lecture, sorry about that. Tried to make it slightly visual and more digestible. Okay, so if I run that anyway, let's actually see what happens. Oh, not what Richard said.
Yeah.
So everything he essentially said was correct, but he's not paying proper attention to this line here, line 4, because when we do A equals something now, we are creating a brand new array that gets stored in a different memory address. So B is pointing to the original memory address that we created up here, but on line 4 we've created a brand new. That was a bit of a trick question, sorry, that was a bit mean. So everyone else gets points, right? Apart from Abdul and Richard this time. You're clawing him back somehow. But I'll show you what Richard was hinting at. So if instead we now mutated A, which we could do, remember, even if we define things with a const or a let, then let's do a dot push 2, 3. Can I have multiple arguments in push like that? No, don't know. Okay, I'll run it. It's not the main question anyway. So now, do we expect B still just to be 1, or do we expect B to be 1, 2, and 3? 1, 2, and 3, based on what Richard said. Yeah, we haven't created a brand new array by using the equals assignment operator. So now they've both changed, yeah, even though we just changed A, because what Richard clearly explained, they point to the same value stored in memory. Then when we mutate this value, yeah, our push method is mutating the actual value, it's not mutating the memory address, therefore they both change. So these are common mistakes that, well, not even junior developers, but developers of all levels can potentially make if they forget these key fundamentals of how JavaScript passes values around and the differences between primitives and non-primitives, and the differences in var, let, and const as well. Yeah. So I will share some links. I'll share a little snippet with the function and the block in, so you can play around with varlet and const and their scoping differences. And yeah, that's it really. Any questions before we wrap it up? It's hard, right? It's getting into the nitty-gritty of how JavaScript works under the hood, but again, it will differentiate you when you come to interview, and you might get questions similar to what I've posed today. When I reassign, what would the value of A be? What would the value of B be? Things like that. And even if you don't get it 100% right, if you could at least, maybe remember that, there's differences between primitives and non-primitives, then they're at least going to see that you're delving a bit deeper into the language. Yeah. Okay. Any questions? All right, thanks very much then. Just a quick clarification. These images are not mine, so these come from JavaScript Understanding the Weird Parts, which is written by Anthony Alessia. And yeah, as you can see, it's only like $10.99 on Udemy. It does contain a lot of good content. Before you purchase, he's got 3.5 hours free of his videos on YouTube. So maybe watch that and see if you like his style. Yeah, as he says, he tries to clarify the weird parts of JavaScript, and I think his presentation technique is really good, and hopefully it made it clearer for me when I was learning the language, so hopefully it could do the same for you as well. Alright, thank you very much.